Well, we've got a guy who can talk about college football in a way that few other people really can. From an analyst on television on CBS to a former head coach at multiple stops, a player in the Pac-12 conference himself, we've got Rick Neuheisel in for a conversation about a whole bunch of stuff that's on a list. Jon Wilner, why Neuheisel?
Well, I mean, we could do a whole show with Rick on UCLA issues, right? Because former UCLA quarterback, former UCLA assistant coach, head coach, his son is on the UCLA staff. I mean, but there's other stuff to talk to him about as well. I have Rick has been on, my wish list for the entire season, even before everything unfolded with the Bruins, because there's, like you said, there's very few people who can talk about college football, not only nationally, but also West Coast college football with as much insight as Rick can. And, he's from his perch in the CBS studio. He is following all the games every week. He's got his radio show on Sirius, and he's still deeply connected with coaches across the country. He is, he is a unique guy.
I'm going to ask him too about the hirings and the processes and what different schools should be thinking. Without further ado, Rick Neuheisel joining us now.
And would you be offended if I introduced you as the father of Jerry Neuheisel?
Offended? No, actually, that's one of the things I did right. That's one of the things I did right. No, I give all the credit to his mom. As you know, the coaching industry is a lonely industry. We spend a lot of time at work rather than at home. And my wife, Susan, did an unbelievable job with our kids. And Jerry's the product of that. And unfortunately for him, he got stuck in the family business. And here he is. And obviously you saw the video. I got a little bit wrapped in with the dad goggles, right? Watching the game.
Totally understandable. Are you living and dying with every play call?
Yeah. And it's hard to break away from that. I mean, when I watched him play in high school, I literally had to go to the farthest corners of the stands. And just because I couldn't keep my mouth from talking. I couldn't keep my thoughts inside. So rather than have somebody looking at me like I was complaining about the coach or the call or what have you, I just went so no one could hear me. It's like being in the forest when the tree falls. If you can't hear the tree fall, did it really fall? That's basically me.
Gotcha.
You're a Rose Bowl guy.
I love the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. What do you make of what's going on with that?
It's a shame because I remember when we moved into the Rose Bowl as I was a junior, 1982, and every one of us on the team was so excited. The Rose Bowl, that's going to be our home field. It felt like the magic carpet, right? To go and play on that particular plot of land. It was just too good to be true. We beat the Trojans that year in an unbelievable game. We beat them 20-19 with no time on the clock. They went for two with no time, having scored a touchdown. And Scott Tinsley got sacked by Carl Morgan. Came in with me as a freshman from Houma, Louisiana. And so I just remember vividly how excited we were to call that home. And I get it. I mean, we're in a 89,000 seat stadium now, and I know they're reporting 39,000 is the average attendance. It's lower than that. It's probably around 25,000. And they inflate it because of season tickets and people who may not showing up. But the bottom line is it looks empty. And the deal is pretty one-sided for the Rose Bowl in terms of concessions and parking. And as you're looking towards the future, when you're having to make more money to pay kids and all that kind of stuff, I understand how you want to make a better deal. So we're going to go through this. It's kind of like Brian Kelly and LSU. There's a contract, right? There's a contract, and now we're going to fight, scratch and claw, and see if we can come to some reasonable solution. And my hope is that we can do something where we at least play one or two games a year at the Rose Bowl because it's that magical. And the SC game should always be played there. That should always be a game there, and somehow, some way, make sense of that. But we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see.
It seems to me like the playing at the Rose Bowl is a big part of UCLA's football identity. And do you feel like moving to SoFi will actually improve attendance? I mean, are all those UCLA fans in the Valley going to go to SoFi if they weren't going to the Rose Bowl?
SoFi is a Band-Aid. I mean, to me, to
Yeah.
have this conversation, you should be saying we need to build the stadium either on campus or in Westwood. That's the answer. I know it's painful, and we had it done in 1980. We as the team basically canvassed the campus and got petitions signed by fellow students, and it was passed. We could build a stadium on campus right there at Drake Stadium, which is the track stadium, named for Edwin C. Ducky Drake, the old track coach who coached both Rayford Johnson and C.K. Yang back in the 50s in the Olympics. So we have it, and it's retrofitted to be a football stadium. It'd be probably about 45 to 50,000. It's ready to go. But the chancellor at the time got, advice from fellow academia folks that said it would be bad for your career to end majors on campus and build a football stadium in the same year. So he decided against it. But to me, that's what needs to happen. If we're going to build UCLA up as a football brand, like Autzen, like Husky Stadium, we need a stadium, and we need some magic back on campus. And if I were back there, I'd be pushing hard for that. I actually asked when I was a coach there to put a tractor out on the Drake Stadium track field so that I could tell recruits that we were going to build there. Yeah.
I love that. There's a lot of coaching searches that'll go on, UCLA included. Your general feel for what's going on right now with the lack of patience for coaches and the number of openings and the urgency everybody seems to have. What's your takeaway as you see what's happening?
Well, it's easy to press the button, I want something different, but you better think through who can I get before you press that button. And therein is what we're not seeing. Who can I really get that is going to move the needle? Now, there may be people that might turn out to be better. And if you're in that situation of disarray, then certainly understandable to make a change. But sometimes we push the button just because we've invited into the hen house, if you will, these pseudo owners, these folks who have given lots of resources. And because of their resources and the desire to keep that gravy train moving, we've given them too much influence, and their influence is absolute. And I have personal experience with it. I just know that it isn't always the AD that's making this call.
There seems to be two models out there. One is the guy who proves himself at multiple stops, whether it's Cignetti or DeBoer, Mike Elko, right? And then you've got the Ryan Day, the Kirby Smart, the Dan Lanning that became head coaches straight from being coordinators and are highly successful.
At really good spots.
At really good spots.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like, one is better than the other, or does it depend on the school that's doing the hiring?
It depends on the school doing the hiring. I mean, those three schools that you mentioned, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon, are laden with resources.
Yeah.
You're gonna, if you have any common sense and any wherewithal to coach the game, you're going to be successful in those three places. And they all were on the a tree that gave them great insight as to how to do it well, right? Ryan was an Urban Meyer guy. The other two guys were both Saban guys. So they know how to do it. And now, given the resources in which they enjoy, they are off and running. There's no shock there. The Cignetti thing is a different kind of model. The Cignetti thing, he was the first to really take advantage of a transfer portal for the boost in the initial year by bringing 13 kids from James Madison, who nobody really knew were that good. But as we watch Elijah Surratt play and a number of the other guys, we see that these guys were darn good players. So that's a little bit different. And if I were an AD today, I would be very mindful when I'm hiring a coach of who he can bring with him, because that is a kickstart and then some. not only to winning games, but also to bringing more boosters to the table. Imagine how easy it is right now for the athletic director at Indiana to enlist people to come get involved in what I'm calling the Church of Signetti. It's you can't get a seat in that in that church, I promise you.
The Oregon State hire, seems to fall not in the resource category, but in maybe a coach who's got proof of performance. That hiring committee that they put together, it's got Mike Riley and Brandon Cooks on it. It's got some donors and boosters on it.
Mike Riley and Brandon Cooks are on it. Brandon Cooks committed to me at UCLA, and I unfortunately told my wide receiver coach, "You make sure that Brandon's okay." And he missed a couple of weeks of calling him, and Brandon said they're not hearing from him, and he got involved in Oregon State. Needless to say, I had to go get a new wide receiver coach because I couldn't go get a new Brandon Cooks.
But Riley's in that committee. I'm told that in their first meeting, Riley said, "We need someone who's been part of a winning program."
Yeah.
How important is that in your mind? Now, it makes sense. You want a guy who's won, but if you're hiring an assistant, how important is it that assistant has come from a place that has that DNA?
Very. And because he's seen it run well. And I go back to the three guys we just talked about, Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, and Ryan Day. I mean, all three of those guys were in programs, and they don't have to be national championship level programs, but have been in programs that have been hugely successful, that have met expectations on an annual basis, that are reinventing themselves, that are adaptable. That's all part and parcel of the world that we're living in right now. And by the way, this new Pac-12 is going to be really kind of fun. I think all those schools are kind of evenly matched, much like the Big 12. Maybe Boise has a little bit more in the way of resources, but the bottom line is that's going to be wildly competitive. I told my wife, I said, if Oregon State or Colorado State calls us, just be ready. We're going to go.
That's certainly something we wanted to ask you about because CBS is, a partner with the new Pac-12. Where do you see that conference falling in the hierarchy? They're trying to bill itself as a top five, right? So you got the Power Four and then the Pac-12. The American's been really strong this year. Where do you see, maybe 3-5 years from now, the new Pac-12 falling on the landscape?
Well, right now, most of the prognosticators out there are saying the winner of the American is going to be the team that gets in as the group of five representative. South Florida's had a nice year, and we usually judge this based on how they do against the big boys, right? South Florida has that win against Florida earlier in the year and so forth. And James Madison is also getting some love because they had a near miss against Louisville. I think they lost 28-14. So I look at the new Pac-12 as a team that more than often than not is going to be the team that puts the team in. San Diego State would be right in this conversation, but for the loss now to Hawaii. And Boise would have been much in this conversation had they not had Notre Dame on their schedule. But the bottom line is this, to me, is going to be a really, really fun conference because, again, you're going to have evenly matched teams with close to the same resources.
You mentioned if Oregon State or Colorado State called. I mean, is that something you thought about? Do you miss the coaching?
I think about it all the time. I mean, I absolutely miss the sidelines, and I'm kind of getting it vicariously now that my son's close to the front lines. And so I have a couple of phone calls a week, and I'll, pour over a little film on Sunday and Monday. And then I realize, hey, I'm only a distraction. Let me get the heck out of the way. I miss coaching. People ask that all the time, and I always say every day. But I think at that level, the group of five level, I think there's a sweet spot for those of us who kind of remember days of yore. I think there's kids that really want to play I don't think you can be upset if you get poached. I think you actually kind of got to look forward to it and develop guys that might be getting overlooked by the Power Four because they'd rather go get somebody with experience, and you develop them. And if they're like Brandon Cooks and they, blossom, then you get to pat them on the back. You get to make a phone calls to your buddies that are coaching at the Power Four and say, you need to look at this guy. And then you celebrate when he goes off and does wonderful things. And when you make that call, you tell that coach, send me a couple of your guys, because you're going to have to make room for these transfers. Send me a couple of your guys, and I'm going to make sure they have a great last couple of years of their college football experience. I think that's the operation that has to happen there. And I think rather than fight it, if you embrace it, you can actually have a lot of fun with your team.
So it sounds like as much thought as you've given this, right? You're accepting of the NIL world, but maybe it sounds to me like maybe you don't want to necessarily be somewhere where every last dime is going to determine what your roster's like.
I talked to a number of coaches, fellas, and their lament is this: they don't mind recruiting. Coaches have had to recruit since the beginning of time, but instead of recruiting players, they're recruiting money. That's what they're doing. They're spending time going out and having boosters dinners and, going off and doing things that have nothing to do with X's and O's and all that stuff, but it's a way to get the money so that they can go out and do things. If you get somebody like Texas Tech has right now with those fellas that sold Double Eagle Energy, the Cody Campbells and the John Sellers, then Joey McGuire can be an old-fashioned football coach. That's right. That's the dream. And he's got a guy by the name of James Blanchard, who's his general manager, who the two of them met when Matt Rule took the Baylor job. So Blanchard was this kind of local, try to help the local high school kids get some looks. So he built a little website, and all the incoming college recruiters that would come to that area kept saying, these guys knows who the players are. And so they started going to him rather than and streamline their operation there. Matt Rule learned about him, brought him to Baylor. He and McGuire meet, and now McGuire's got him off at Texas Tech. So that's wonderful with the resources, but not everybody can operate in that deal. And so as we look towards the future, remember this. On June 30th of last year, at Texas Tech, I just had a guy on our radio show on Sirius XM that told me $30 million transferred that day to the roster at Texas Tech to get ahead of the 20.5 or 20.4 limitation. $30 million went into bank accounts for their roster. And then now they can spend the 20.4 after starting July 1. But how are you going to recreate that next year? How are you going to create $50 million of money for next year's roster? So everybody's going to be circumventing these NIL rules, and that's just not a game that the group of five can play. So I think from that standpoint, from a simple mind like mine, I can sit there and say, I'm going to play within this, and it probably wouldn't be 20.5, be half of that. And then you can make a roster and you can have a great time coaching your guys. And those who are talented enough to go up, we celebrate that.
Yeah.
The mess at LSU is interesting with Brian Kelly. And, I keep hearing and seeing people say, well, that'll give the next candidate some pause because look at what they would be working with and look at the environment there. Do coaches think that way? Do they look at what's going on and what am I entering? Or is it just what can I do and what's the money?
Well, this is a little suspicious because what's happening there is they're using private investigators to snoop into Brian Kelly's personal life. They're looking around, seeing if they can find anything that qualifies as against the clause of moral turpitude. And if you're doing that after the fact, that's just dirty business. And so if you're a prospect at the LSU for the LSU job, you're going to be mesmerized by the talent that you can get and that you're the only show in town in terms of a power program in the state of Louisiana, which is laden with talent. But do you really want somebody looking up your tailpipe all the time about your personal life? Now, for those of us who have no skeletons, don't worry. You can sit there and say, but how easy is it for them to create a skeleton if they're willing to do it this much? And therein lies what I think is a little unseemly about this whole thing going on in the Bayou.
Would you say LSU's the best job open right now?
Well, with all that nonsense with the governor and all that, I would put it behind Florida. I think Florida probably is the best job, but Penn State's awful good too. They've got such a following in the Northeast, and I still haven't ruled Mike Elko out on that one. I know the oil boys in Aggie land are going to fight scratch and claw before they let him walk out of there. But when you're not born in Texas, you're always feel a little bit like an outsider.
Yep.
And so I can see where that lure of the Northeast, he's a Jersey guy. I can see where he might get infatuated, and certainly Penn State has the wherewithal to make a very handsome offer.
Coaches will get asked about, hey, you're on a list. There's a rumor. Jed Fish addressed it
right
just the last few days. I asked Jason Eck today, hey, you've only been at New Mexico for 1 year, and he says, look, I'm not going to make a promise I can't keep, but this is where I want to be until there's a no-brainer opportunity that is out there, of course. But how did you handle that? And what advice would you give to these guys today?
I think the less you say, the better off you are. I think you'd say, look, at the rumors are going to be out there. I can't stop those. All I can tell you is my focus is on this team and this game. And, it sounds very Belichickian, but that's all I can do. And the more you say, the more they can walk it back on you, and you're made to feel terrible. The greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban, swore that he was not taking the Alabama job. Swore he wasn't taking it. And yes, he did. And he did it within days. So just say, if you don't say anything, they can't say you said something wrong.
Rick, we certainly can't let you go here without asking about the UCLA search and, where you think the Bruins fit in the hierarchy. Is there a model you think they should pursue? I certainly know, with Jerry on the staff, I don't know how detailed you want to get into this, but I do want to at least raise the topic with you.
Yeah. No, it's a great topic. I still think UCLA can be a great premier job. I mean, it's right in the middle of a unbelievable city with unbelievable weather and unbelievable tradition and history. It just needs to all of a sudden decide it wants to play with the big boys. That's ultimately what they have to do. And they just haven't done it. Now there's a new president. We'll see if he wants to change that paradigm. Martin Jarman is trying. I can't fault him for lack of effort, but it's not been good enough to date. And this isn't all on him. Casey Wasserman is a huge piece of this puzzle. We were talking about, influential alums. He's on the search committee, and I think 4 guys that are his clients are also on the search committee, which tells you there's some influence there. So we'll see. I'm hearing names like Sean Lewis at San Diego State. I'm hearing Bob Chesney at James Madison trying to see if lightning will strike twice after the Signetti fine.
Yep.
And those guys those are good names. I'm not saying anything about it, but it doesn't matter the name until you change what you're doing. You cannot, and I'll say this defiantly, you cannot let D'Anton Lynn, who has a wonderful season as your defensive coordinator, go across town for $1 million more to do the same job. You can't do that.
Yeah.
It says that you are not willing to play in the big leagues. And until UCLA, and if you're fine with that, then fine. But then be fine with the expectations of being a second-tier team. And I don't know that anybody who has an affinity for UCLA wants to be in that company. So we have to, as a department, devote some more resources and more attention to a program that is not going to sit and do second fiddle stuff. And that's the most perfect example. A guy leaving your school to go coach at the school that you need to beat to be considered successful. And you're letting him do it just because they'll pay $1 million more.
That is actually hits on an issue that I think is super interesting. It's the 4 West Coast schools in the Big Ten. It seems to me there is a clear separation. Oregon and USC have one level of commitment. UCLA, and I think Washington's commitment They want to win, but I look at it, they're almost closer to UCLA in some regards than they are to Oregon and USC when it comes to an institution all-in philosophy to win in the Big Ten. How do you view that?
That would be different. That would be different from them, from my experience. Now, I have not been at Washington in some time. As a matter of fact, my Rose Bowl team is going to be celebrating the 25th year anniversary this weekend.
That's right.
The Purdue game is going to be the scene for the reunion of my guys. So wishing them a great couple of days in celebrating what was a great run there back 25 years ago. But Washington, to me, while I was there, was committed to the enterprise. They would do what was necessary, and I was so thankful for the administration in doing so. It was a struggle at Colorado, and it was a nightmare at UCLA.
CFP rankings, what are you most curious about with what you see now and where it ends up?
7 teams from the SEC in the top 14. And if you just have a couple of quirks in the schedule, all 7 could end up with 2 losses or less. Yeah. And that will be a wild ride. I still am curious how Notre Dame gets this pass. They need to erect a statue for Jack Swarbrick, who was on the CFP committee with the other 3 guys, Craig Thompson and Bob Bowlesby and Greg Sankey. You talk about 10-2, and it's over. They're in. And the only real challenges, they had Arkansas on the schedule, SC on the schedule, and if they go 2-2 in those games and then beat everybody else, they're in. And they're literally ahead of Miami by how many spots? 6 spots.
5? 6 spots. Yeah,
6 spots, and Miami beat them. Same record.
Yep.
They're the Rolling Stones, and so erect the statue, Jack Swarbrick. And by the way, the only concession that he made was, okay, we can't get a bye. Well, they've changed that rule after 1 year. Yeah. I go, this guy's a genius.
All right, so before we let you go, if you could change, wave a wand and change something about the playoff process, whether it's the size of the playoff, the selection process, the committee, is there anything that jumps out to you? This has got to change immediately.
Well, as the old fella said, the answer is money. What was the question, right?
Right, yeah.
Here's what's going to happen. They're going to go to 16. Maybe not this year, because there'll be people that will be, butting heads over how to go about this, but they're going to go to 16. The fact that the SEC went to 9 conference games, I think, is evidence of this. And then you're going to get play-in games. And the play-in games are going to be absolutely riveting, because if you're sitting there right now as a ACC team, you have to win the conference to get in. And I think that's also going to be true of the Big 12. Well, if you can get a couple of guaranteed, go to 16, and now you can get 2 each. Now you get 4 teams that can get in there. And given the schedules that we have with 17-team conferences and 18-team conferences, the A&M schedule is wildly unfair. A&M has 4 fired coaches on their schedule. They're going to get to the SEC championship game without playing Georgia, without playing Alabama, without playing Oklahoma, without playing Vanderbilt. And it's incredible. I mean, how in the heck can you figure out who's really the best? So now if you don't worry about that, you can start playing these play-in games. It's more inventory, which means more money, and off we go.
Rick Neuheisel, let's get you and Jerry to Oregon State. You're
no Mike Riley. He's initially he's right on the analyst list. I'll be sitting right next to him. He and I will be the analysts. We'll let Jerry coach the team.
There you go. Love it. Thank you,
Rick. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Super entertaining and insightful. Can't thank you enough, man.
You guys are the best. I appreciate you both.
There he goes. Let's talk, Wilner. Let's download on that. First of all, just great insight into the hiring processes and what these schools should be thinking about. I love that part of it. Doesn't sound like he's done coaching. I mean, look, if you, if you hire Jerry, are you getting Rick in the wash?
He's thought a lot about it, clearly.
Yeah. Look, the playoff is going to dominate the next few weeks as we talk about what's going on. But these coaching hires are all going to be operating in the background. It's fascinating stuff, big time.
And it's going to overlap, right? Because there's going to be jobs. The jobs that are open now are going to create more openings, and those are going to create more openings.
Yeah.
So there's going to be like 3 rounds of the carousel spinning, during which there's going to be the playoff. And then on January 2nd, I think it is, the transfer portal opens, right? And then the NFL firings could start another wave.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I think, like no winter we've ever seen on the hiring front. And, he had great insight. I don't know. There are very, very few people who can talk about college football with insight from as many different angles as Rick can. Former quarterback, former coach at 3 places. Now he's been doing TV and radio for a long time. He sees the whole checkerboard like very few people out there.
And he's dangerous enough too at this point of his career to say what he's really thinking. And that's what I love about it too.
Yeah,
because, you get this guy while he's still, a real candidate for these open jobs, and he's not going to be as forthcoming as that. So I think we're getting this kind of gritty and real insight. Make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel, share it with your friends and family. Tell us in the comment section, who should UCLA hire? Who should Oregon State hire? Who are the real candidates for these jobs? And we'll be back next week with an all-new episode.
Thanks, everybody.